Hey gangs, and welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel and back to the world of Hearthstone 4, and today we'll be using the Russia Reworked mod again to play Russia, obviously. However, today we're not going to be playing an unaligned ideology, no. We're not going to be playing an aggressive ideology, no. Nor are we going to be playing some sort of extremist ideology, no. Today we're going to be playing as democratic Russia. And this is one of the more interesting playthroughs possible with this mod, because obviously democratic Russia. Now, how would you balance that? Because essentially, if you go as Russia democratic, that immediately gives you an opportunity to immediately join the Allies and screw over Germany basically right at the beginning of the game, which isn't all that great when it comes to balance, obviously. Now, how would you balance that? Well, there are a variety of ways how you would be able to balance that. A civil war, for example, but actually, if you go down the democratic path, there is no civil war. Now, this is both a buff, sort of, to your country, because you don't have to waste a lot of manpower or equipment or anything like that. But it's also a big nerf, because the Russian Civil War is a great way of actually leveling up your generals. If you want some good examples, just, take a look at the videos that I made when it comes to the Third Rome and the Slavic Empire, using basically the Russia Reworked mod, going down both the non-aligned ideology and the fascist ideology. The Russian Civil War is a great way of completely, insanely upgrading your generals to the point where they are essentially win every front just through pure stats. Your divisions don't even have to be all that great. In fact, usually, if you want to play as Russia, sort of properly, you just want to spam out basically 20 with pure infantry, with maybe engineers or maybe artillery as sort of the support battalions. However, because we don't go through that civil war, we don't gain access to those great buffs and the generals and the level ups and everything like that. So that's a big old nerf. But at the same time, we don't lose all the equipment, and manpower. So you could say it's also a bit of a buff and a nerf at the same time. Now, what's the second issue? Well, there's the political power issue, and there's the industrial issue. There's the issue of just having good advisors. And because you're going democratic, you do lose a lot of the communist advisors. Obviously, they sort of betray you, they leave the country, everything like that. Same with your generals, to a certain degree. However, in this mod, when it comes to actually playing the democracy, there is a giant buff that's coming up. And a nerf as well. It's mostly categorized as a nerf, but in my opinion, it's well, it can be viewed as either of those two. Alright, so we just became democratic not too long ago. No real civil war, no real action at all, just a bunch of focus tree decisions and just clicking focuses and waiting a while. But here we go, losing control. Now this is the big nerfing point that the democratic sort of pathway for the Soviet Union or / Russia. This is the big nerf that you get. You start losing the former Soviet Socialist republics, the sort of individual portions, or the states, you could call them in sort of an American setting, I suppose. The states that are the federative regions, whatever you want to call them. It's not losing those regions. So we lost Ukraine, we lost Belarus, now we lost the Karelia region. And very soon we're gonna lose also a whole bunch of the Caucasus, and then Central Asia, and also obviously the Japanese sees North Sakhalin, because why not? They have a claim to it. They don't actually have it as a core territory, and I do think that we'll be able to get it back later. There isn't actually much there at all, I don't think so. The south of Sakhalin does have a little tiny bit of oil, but North Sakhalin doesn't really have anything, and since we didn't actually build anything there, yeah, it's basically pointless. But it's nice to see that Mongolia basically became democratic. Seems like Vtuber and Mongolia go with whatever your ideology is when you're playing the Soviet Union in this mod. Whatever you do, the Mongolians and the Entente essentially just replicate that. And that's kind of nice because it ensures that you have at least some sort of an ally within the region, and some sort of an ally or a power, very minor regional power that's at least willing to support you. If we ever go into a conflict, there we go, we lost Central Asia. But if we ever were to go into a conflict, then at least, we have 1 or 2 Mongolian divisions supporting us. And so that's not much, but it's something. At least we can maybe ask for manpower or something. I don't know, it's kind of not much, but it's something, it's kind of a nice, it's nice flavor, so to say. But here we go, we're starting to lose all of these individual states, and that's not all that great, you might think. Well, you might think that. However, one thing that you must consider is that now these individual countries, later on in the focus tree, we do gain an option to actually, reintegrate them back, so to say. But of course the United Kingdom blockades our ports because, well, as if we weren't nerfed enough. Now, the United Kingdom blockading our ports is genuinely what I do consider to be a proper nerf. Like, that's 100% a nerf, because it blocks your industry and it blocks your equipment output. Now, that's just 100% nerf, but, you can remedy that later in the focus tree, obviously. However, when it comes to these individual, republics, Central Asia, the Eastern Europe, and Karelia, everything like that, even North Sakhalin to a certain degree, obviously, because the Japanese can build it up if they so choose to. However, I don't think they usually do. But what you have to consider is that now these individual countries do have the basic focus tree. Now, what does the basic focus tree have? Well, most importantly for us, it has the focus tree related to industry, which gives you free factories, free military factories, free infrastructure, and everything like that. And whereas, for example, if we were to build up, I don't know, some civilian factories, even as the USSR, let's say we are all together, we are playing maybe as, just generic non-aligned Russia, something like that. If you want to build up, let's say, the equivalent of those factories, let's say 3 civilian factories you want to build up in Belarus, Ukraine, all the Central Asian republics, everything like that. If you want to build up those factories, the equivalent would take you maybe over a year. However, because they get the generic focus tree and they're all independent, they get to build those factories, they get to get that manpower, they get to build that infrastructure. And later, when we reintegrate them, that industry, all of that industrial power, all of those armies, all of that equipment that they gather, that's all gonna be ours. This is essentially the same way that you break the game, sort of in a minor fashion, when you have puppets. When you have puppets, and when you release puppets after a war, let me just quickly consider this. And I think we'll be sticking with Kerensky. Yeah, I think Kerensky. I mean, we're obviously going to war, and Kerensky's sort of famous for continuing the war, so yeah, we're gonna do that. But you have to consider that, you have all of these countries, all of them doing their industrial focus tree, at least hopefully, and in the majority of the time, obviously the AI does do the industrial focus tree straight away, and even the airfield focuses, everything like that. All of them do these focuses separately. That's a lot of industry, that's a lot of manpower, everything like that. And so when we eventually reintegrate them, hopefully reintegrate them, while it's going to be very expensive, it's going to take a while, it's going to be very much worth it in the long run, and it's going to make us an industrial superpower overnight, essentially. But here we go, we first have to invest into these individual countries to actually get them on side, which is, it makes sense, we're sort of the overlord of them. They are technically our puppets, so yeah, we have to take care of them. That investment, well, it's very expensive if you actually look at the individual political power cost and the time it takes and everything like that. If you've taken at least a few focuses related to political power, or you just wait it out, you don't necessarily do all that many focuses in the meantime, or you have a mod like this one, it's it's quite easy to actually get through this. But again, I'm using the mod, but realistically, if you're willing to just wait it out, maybe you're not going to be ready right at the beginning of the Second World War, maybe you're just gonna have to wait like a month or two extra. but ultimately it's gonna pay off, right? It's gonna pay off, and since you essentially have time until like 1941, till Barbarossa, definitely have enough time. And even if you wait a little bit longer than I am doing right now, that's not terrible at all either. That actually has its own bonuses, because that means that all of the individual AI countries, not only are they gonna do the focuses, opposes rearmament, get out of here. Not only are they going to do the individual focuses, but they're also going to build those factories themselves, which saves you time, saves you resources, saves you a whole bunch of stuff. So it's, ultimately, while it might take longer, ultimately you could argue it's actually a giant buff, even if you wait. The longer you wait, it might be even better, you never know. Alright, so it's time to begin the process of reunification. Now, if you were paying attention at the sort of the beginning, yeah, I suppose we could also just leave them all independent, but we're not gonna do that, because if you were paying attention at the beginning, when we lost all of those independent, well, now independent, quote-unquote independent countries, we lost roughly 30 factories overall from that, from then being separate, which you might think, that's not actually all that bad. Well, losing 30 factories at the beginning of the game is it's no joke. It's quite a substantial number, and in fact, 30 factories can decide whether you're a great power or a minor power when you gain them or lose them at the beginning of the game. Gaining 30 factories at the beginning of the game is insane, just like out of the blue. Imagine if Germany at the beginning of the game gained 15 civilian and 15 military factories. There we go. All of the Caucasus. The Caucasus is in our hands again, along with Crimea, and we got 29 divisions from that, which is nothing to scoff at. And I do think they use the same templates as we do. So in fact, it's just extra 30. It's extra 30 divisions. So that's actually pretty decent. It means you save time. And it means that, well, you gain more manpower. You can just immediately delete them and gain more manpower, and obviously gain more equipment, everything like that. You can do all those things, obviously. But at the beginning of the game, obviously, when we, got shattered, when the Federation basically shattered itself, we lost 30 factories. Now, we're very quickly going to see just how many factories we actually gained from all of that, because that's quite something. I think we actually gained 30 factories just by reintegrating the Caucasus. So that's actually quite something, if you consider that's only one small part of all of the countries that got shattered, essentially. And I do believe that a majority of that is from their focus trees, because they're minor countries. I don't think they have that much industry that they steal from you at the beginning of the game, so it's going to be fine ultimately. I do think that it's ultimately going to be just fine. And once we gain all of the other small remaining bits, then we'll see exactly just how many factories we get back. Now, Karelia is a different beast, because they are a puppet to Finland. So it's sort of possible that the Finns could have built some factories within within Karelia itself, because it's their puppet. Maybe the AI is somehow triggered to immediately build let's say infrastructure of civilian factories or military factories. I'm not entirely sure if the AI reacts to something like that. But, here we go. Yep, that's all of the Central Asian stuff. Another roughly 30 factories are ours. So, that means that, by the math of the, how things are going, we should gain roughly 30 factories from annexing Belarus and, or Belarusia, and the Ukraine. Which makes sense. I mean, it would be quite unfortunate for the Ukraine not to give us a lot of factories, because that's probably the biggest and that's the most powerful sort of separate region, or the most powerful country that sort of tears itself from the initial federation, or from the provisional government federation thing that you have going on. And yeah, we're about to not necessarily finish reunification. It's actually quite a long focus. It takes quite a long time to finish the whole process, and actually keeping them separate is much quicker. However, keeping them separate, well, it's sort of an interesting idea. You might want to, no, we're not going to help Turkey. You might want to sort of consider that when doing some sort of role play. Like, yeah, you form this sort of Eastern Bloc that has all these buffs for industry and the economy overall. However, it's just not comparable when it comes to just directly annexing and then getting all of those factories for one, getting all of that manpower, but also getting all of those divisions. I mean, so far we've actually captured almost like 60 divisions from them, which is actually quite substantial, because that's essentially like, oh, here we go, and yeah, it seems like that was again 30 factories, maybe a little bit over 30 factories actually. So yeah, that's completely fine. So ultimately, we still haven't gotten Karelia, and we still haven't recovered North Kalen. So those are going to be interesting numbers to consider as well. But if you consider that we lost 30 factories at the beginning, we regained 90 factories, and we got 70, almost 80 divisions from that, which that's actually quite decent. And the longer we would have waited, the longer, the more industry would have gotten, the more divisions we would have gotten, the more industrial power, equipment, everything like that we would have ultimately received from this whole escapade. However, I do think that this makes us insanely powerful. Almost 200 factories at the beginning of the game. You know, it's 1938, and so we still have technically a year before us, before the Germans start doing a whole bunch of stuff. So at this point, we are essentially, when it comes to industry, kind of not. Well, it's basically impossible to actually beat us at this point. We are unassailable when it comes to the industrial power that we present. And that was a long lag, definitely, but that was just a Munich agreement. For some reason, like, I know if it's just in my game, but whenever there's, like, you know, a small adjustment of either ideology or, you know, when there's the Munich agreement or the Anschluss, it always just takes such a long time. So now we're gonna demand the return of our land, which kind of rhymes to a certain degree. But yeah, we're essentially going to, well, we're gonna strongman. We're gonna arm twist the Finnish and the Finns, more rather, and the Russian reunification complete. That's real nice. We're gonna arm twist the Japanese and the Finns to give back Karelia and North Kalen. Now, North Kalen, I'm not too worried about. That's probably just nothing. But the Karelia situation is going to be actually kind of interesting, because it's not a plethora of small countries. Now, if you annex a plethora of small countries, that's better, because, well, as you saw, we essentially tripled the initial quote-unquote investment of actually losing those territories. Actually, more than tripled if you consider that we lost all of those, well, factories, those 30 factories, including Karelia, right? But including, Karelia. And but now that we've turned it all back, we've more than tripled, obviously. There's a bunch of numbers thing, a bunch of math going on. But we more than tripled it, so, but those were a plethora of small countries. Now, Karelia is obviously only one country, so it's going to be interesting to see just how many factories we gained from them. Hopefully the Finns have built something in them, but it's also going to give us sort of an estimate of what a single country, after roughly a year of being left alone, actually develops, like what the AI focuses on. Sort of a nice controlled experiment. At the same time, they are a puppet, so they couldn't exactly build anything from their own, just industrial power. It's or they could have, but not as much, because they probably gave a whole bunch of stuff to the Finns as well, which is unfortunate if we ever want to go up against the Finns. But since we're playing a democracy, that's kind of unlikely. So, but on the other hand, maybe the Finnish have actually built something in them. Sort of, who knows what's going on there. But it's going to be a nice controlled experiment, if because that region of the USSR has literally like almost nothing in it. Like losing that territory, that means absolutely nothing. But here we go. We did that, and nothing yet. Let me actually just check what we want to do. We probably want to. We can expand the sphere, but actually, we can't necessarily do that yet. We have to do that after. Yeah, we have to do that in 1939. We still have some time before that. We can't. We could go for the. Actually, might do the Entente. Yeah, let's reform the Entente. That's gonna be kind of cool. And yeah, in the meantime, I guess we could do these. Yeah, those are actually some nice. But Japan, and here we go. Guess back really. So we have 199, and now we have 206. That's actually pretty decent. So 7 factories. 7 factories from that. That's not terrible. That's not terrible. Now we probably initially lost maybe, I don't know, like 2 or 3 factories from actually losing that territory. So we lost 30 factories altogether, but we gained roughly 97. It's almost 100. So you lose 30, but you gain almost 100. That's really fucking strong, actually. Yeah, that's really, really strong. That's almost insane how strong that is. Definitely better than just leaving them independent, because those industrial bonuses that you gain, right? I mean, it's if you want to have like a vast alliance of minor puppets, that's interesting. In other games, for example, in EU4, that's an interesting strategy. To a certain degree, it could be an interesting strategy in CK2, because, well, that game functions a little bit differently. But in Hearts of Iron 4, no, definitely you want that core territory back, and you want that industry back, and you want everything like that. So, almost 100 factories after a year from reunification. Yeah, that's really strong. So, we are essentially, well, it would be foolish to say that we are 100 factories ahead of a regular Soviet Union or Russia, because because we had to go through quite a harsh process. We had the British blockade, we had sort of a period of instability which continuously gives you negative stability and can only be fixed after your entire realm shatters. So it's that's not fair to say. Maybe we're roughly 50 factories altogether ahead of sort of a regular Soviet Union or a regular Russia, and that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool, and we didn't really do any expanding yet, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, we're a democracy, so we can't necessarily expand, but yeah, we can take slices of Germany, we can take slices of Japan, obviously, and they don't like us very much, because we obviously control North Sakhalin. They gave it back, which is quite nice of them, because, you know, I mean, if they didn't give it back, we'll just straight up invade them, and since they're having trouble in China, that would have been the easiest thing ever. Would have just taken South Sakhalin and then immediately invaded the mainland, but since we've taken on Japan so many times in the last couple of videos, let's not do that. Instead, I do have other plans, but in the meantime, yeah, not much is actually going on. We still have roughly a year, or something close to a year, before the Germans start doing their little shtick. So, yeah, let's just wait a while and, well, see what's going on. Alright, so we're about to reform the Entente, which should essentially just replace the, you know, Russian sphere, essentially alliance that we had going on, or faction that we had going on. It just renames it to the Entente, which that's kind of cool. This focus tree is kind of interesting because it does all give you some good bonuses, but at the same time it does allow you to expand potentially, even sort of a very aggressive democracy. But by doing that focus, we actually should have invited France to the Entente. So let's see how they expand. Yeah, they could expand. Let's see how they respond, because that's something. Well, France, it's not like it's very necessary to really have them, but it would be cool. I mean, the sort of Franco-Russian alliance, it's kind of a France refuses. Well, that's we're so they're kind of that's not very nice of them, is it? So I guess we'll have to look elsewhere for allies. And we just invited the UK, and by the looks of things, yep, they accept. So now they are firmly within the Entente, and they are really the only ones we actually need when it comes to the Western powers, other than maybe the United States. But we're not really gonna engage with the United States at all when it comes to alliances and stuff like that, because hey, you know, they didn't help us last time, okay? They didn't help us last time. They waited until we fell, and then they suddenly jumped in and took all the glory as per usual. So you're not gonna, you know, do anything with the United States when it comes to good relations at all. All we need is, well, we do need the United Kingdom, obviously, and we guaranteed Poland already, so no matter what happens with them, they're gonna end up in our alliance, okay? And the French, yeah, they can keep the allies. Who cares? They can keep the allies as if it means anything right now. Yeah, the allies, a plural, when they're the only ones in it. Yeah, okay, they don't even have any puppets. Japanese... Oh no, I hate this event. It's so... ugh. I mean, they literally just rip 6 divisions from your front line and they come rushing in there. And, I mean, let's try this, but I never make it in time. It's like almost impossible, so... whatever, let them just do their thing. It's such a cringe event. I just wish that... whatever. I mean, it's not like they take your territory at all. It's not like it leads to a war. It's not like it does anything. Gives them some research speed. I mean, from the... there we go, we can invite Belgium. From the Japanese perspective, it's quite, you know, powerful because they do gain a whole bunch of research and everything, but other than that, it's not all that necessary, so, yeah, kind of cringe. But, whatever. We gotta get Belgium involved, which is quite nice because that means that, you know, the British do have sort of a pathway when it comes to, like, actually attacking the Germans, which is always nice. Next up, I do think we'll try inviting... I guess, yeah, the Greeks. The Greeks should be fine, because while they aren't necessarily directly threatened yet, they do have a border with Albania, or, you know, formerly Albania, and so they can try and mess up Italy a tiny bit, but ultimately, yeah, both the UK and we are protecting the independence of Poland, so, you know, even if the Germans try anything, I mean, at this point, we have over 300 divisions. If they try anything, we could beat them one-on-one alone, because all they have when it comes to territory and industry, from the focus tree, all they have is basically, you know, pre-World War II stuff. They haven't taken over Poland, which is quite a substantial number of factories. They haven't taken out France, which is a decent amount of factories, and they don't have all their boys in yet. You know, all of the Axis hasn't actually been quote-unquote formed yet. They don't have Romania. They don't have potentially Yugoslavia. Spain isn't in. So yeah, it's quite that's quite a debuff for the Germans. They only really have Austria and Czechoslovakia, or, you know, more rather the Czech side of Czechoslovakia. Even the Hungarians haven't joined in yet, so they are in quite the predicament here. And it's more likely than not that if, you know, this was actually controlled by a German player, they would try to get Austria. They would try to get, they would try to help the Japanese so they can win the Asian War. They would try to get at least the, I don't know, the Baltics maybe on the side, Portugal maybe, but there we go. Poland refuses German ultimatum, and so this is it. We're gonna try and invite Greece. Hopefully they actually agree to it. And now we're gonna support the boys when it comes to, yeah, there we go, Poland. We should, yeah, invite them definitely, so our alliance, the Entente, grows, and the pathetic allies led by France can just sit there and do nothing. They can just do nothing. This is all the Entente. We're back. It's absolutely magnificent, obviously. And this should really be an extremely quick war. If you've seen, you know, any of the videos from this mod before, then, you know, we're just gonna overwhelm them. Because maybe not. This might not be such a pushover as I'm hinting at, more rather, because, well, usually when we do this, right, when we are non-aligned, or we are the Third Rome, or Fire, something like this, our generals have been boosted to an insane degree, right? But at this point, all we have is industry, and I'm sure we have a big alliance, we have some insane industrial capacity, and we have a lot of factories, we have a decent navy if we combine our navy with the Royal Navy, a big air force, but our generals suck, and we are still using just a regular, division, basically just all infantry with here and there we have some support equipment and some artillery as support as well. So our our divisions are actually kind of trash, and our generals are kind of trash. We have a lot of divisions. They're not that great. Sure, they're a hard enough level because I didn't have to do anything with them, so I just trained them up, but this could actually be a bit hairy. Now, I don't expect the Germans to actually capitulate Poland, and I don't expect that we'll have to fight too hard when it comes to actual Russian soil. But it could be a bit of a hairy situation when it comes to actually trying to push into Germany proper. And that would be kind of a bad thing, because you have to imagine that eventually the Hungarians are going to get in. Eventually, maybe the Romanians are going to get in, and so that could turn very ugly very quickly. It means it's going to be essentially a stalemate, sort of a, the Entente all over again, just a stalemate. But this time it's going to be a very, very large stalemate on the Eastern Front, which those kind of stalemates, they're very big stalemate, so let's hope that nothing like that happens. We should eventually outgrind them, obviously, because we have more manpower, we have more industry, we have more members, we have more everything. So even if it turns into a stalemate, eventually we would grind them down, but we have to rush in there. This is one thing, if you try and play a democratic rush and support Poland, this is the crucial moment. You really, really have to stop the Germans from advancing into Poland. Really have to stop the Germans from capitulating Poland, because if you don't do that, more rather, the Germans can just immediately blast their way into your territory. Now, well, that sounds kind of interesting, right? It's unnecessary. At that point, you have to ask yourself, why would you go democratic? Why would you guarantee Poland if you're not going to rush in there and really help them? At that point, you might have just gone unaligned, or just gone with a different ideology or different approach completely, and just... you could just stay on the border, right? Fortify it and everything like that, but, that's kind of... At that point, might as well just should have just signed the... At that point, you could have just signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Again, the quote-unquote Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, even though, whatever, that guy's probably somewhere in exile. But yeah, you really have to defend the Polish, because, for one, their AI is actually pretty decent. They do have an aggressive sort of approach to when it comes to their just AI, how they try to handle front lines and everything. They do put up quite a decent fight when it comes to the aggression that they show. They do have a decent amount of manpower. They do have relatively decent generals, better than my generals in the current situation, that's for sure. But yeah, so you want to keep them around because, well, it's a relatively good ally to have. That's essentially why you also want to get Portugal, Greece, and Romania. These three countries are relatively good when it comes to the aggression that they show. And Portugal, not so much. Okay, Portugal is mostly there because they like to, for some reason, annoy the navy side with their very limited navy. They're sort of good for 1-2 engagements. But Greece is a very good AI ally because they're extremely aggressive. Same goes for Romania. They have very good divisions, very good generals, and it's good to keep them on side. And when it comes to the Western allies, it's good to have Italy, like the Stresa front. That one's actually really insane because the Italian AI is they're more focused on offense. So if you actually gain Italy, as let's say Britain or France, you're essentially unassailable when it comes to the navy side, because the Italian AI likes to build up the navy quite a bit, but if you have an additional support for your large navy from the Italian navy, it's pretty decent. And they do have a very aggressive AI. They do like to just push and push and push and push. And let's try and invite Romania. However, they also like to navally invade, attack constantly, everything like that. And while Poland is not necessarily completely within the same category, it's good to keep them around. Let's try and protect them from the Hungarians as well, because while we did get rid of the Germans in Eastern Prussia, you can never be sure when it comes to Hungary. Sometimes I've seen the Germans attack them because the Hungarians ask for Slovakia, the transfer of Slovakia, and the Germans are losing. And sometimes the Germans attack them, sometimes the Hungarians attack them. It's sort of strange. It's strange how it works out, but it does work out sometimes. So the Kingdom of Romania refuses. Now that's just not nice. So let's try with Portugal, Spain. Do we have an option for Spain? No, we don't, because obviously we are sort of reforming the Entente, obviously. Let's try Brazil, actually. Brazil is one of those nations that's very good to keep around if you have any plans for that part of the world, and we'll just have to see, like, maybe it will come useful, maybe we could use an ally in that part of the world, you never know, right? It's, well, you know, it just might come in handy. You know, we are a constitutional... Actually, it's kind of interesting. It's turning into more of a constitutional, monarchy club, because we have the United Kingdom, we have Russia, and the United Kingdom, you know, obviously. But we also have Russia here, and we have the Tsar as sort of a figurehead when it comes to the events that we got. You know, he's sort of a figurehead, boosts ability and everything like that. So, sort of a constitutional monarchy club here, and you can see that from France didn't agree, right? France just was completely out of that, like they didn't want anything to do with us. So that's kind of an interesting thought. So okay, interesting. That would have been actually kind of a cool alliance, you know, some sort of like constitutional democracy, whatever. And a very like different ideology than democracy itself. Like maybe it's more aggressive, or you get more stability, more war support, or something like that, because you have this figurehead that's sort of boosting morale or something. That could have been an interesting thought for a mod or for actual implementation into the game. But yeah, we're just sort of holding the line and attacking here and there, building up the factories and industry. Improve Eastern Poland. Ah, it's because they're our allies. Okay, it was sort of like, what? What? Like, that's that's an interesting thought there. Like, we take them over even though they're our allies. No, it's just because they're our allies we can improve them, which, now, kind of a cool thing. Kind of a cool thing to do. It's ultimately it improves your entire alliance, and that's kind of nice. That's kind of nice. It's sort of like how the British can improve the Commonwealth, or the puppets, basically. That's kind of cool. Okay, so the Germans, no, the Italian-Russian War. So the Germans, okay, declared war on Hungary. Why? That's a strange one. Okay, so maybe it was like the attempt to gain Slovakia, you know, transfer of power or something. Okay, well anyway, we didn't have to invite them. They're just our allies now. That's it's very nice. They can immediately seize Vienna, try to go after Slovakia from the south, and it's gonna make our jobs much easier. Alright, so it looks like we'll be very swiftly dealing with this access issue we have right now. It's going to be resolved in a very timely fashion. It didn't really take that long. Like, we've been fighting for basically only a year. The Hungarian betrayal, I suppose you could call it, was actually quite useful, because the Germans had to, well, the Hungarians could just capture Vienna, which usually have to fight very heavily to actually capture and to capitulate the Germans. But because the Hungarians did their stuff, we can then very quickly get some payback on a certain someone that didn't help us before, and well. You know what they say, there is only one superpower now, or actually there are two superpowers, you know, the United Kingdom and Russia. And we don't want any other potential superpowers meddling with us. No, we definitely don't want any of that. And yeah, it's not for payback. No. It's because they're not a constitutional monarchy, Moran. They're not a constitutional monarchy, right? I mean, you know, we are in the King's Club, but the good guy King's Club. Okay, like they they revolted against the monarchy, right? I mean, the French, they're not in the Entente either, and look what they did with their kings. It's absolutely terrible, I tell ya. But yeah, let's just agree to invite these small nations. I mean, they're basically our allies anyway, right? So yeah, might as well. And let's build up a bit further, because that payback. Oh, not payback. I mean the restoration of the monarchy. Yeah, that's what's going to be a very peaceful restoration and a very safe restoration. That's what's going to be going on. Yeah, definitely. And just to keep it thematic, obviously New England, that's the justification, because, well, New England's gonna become the part of Old England again. I'm just gonna keep it straight. And the reason why we're able to do something like this is because the Russian democratic focus tree, it actually, you can become sort of a sort of a peacekeeper, where you get bonuses to your industry and to your defense if you're, and you send ultimatums. You send just, essentially war goals. I think you gain war goals around against the against non-democratic people that surround you, or something akin to that. And so we can technically go to war also with the Japanese. But the alternate sort of path is that you get less bonuses, but you can declare war goals on democracies as well, which that's nice. That's very nice, because it sort of makes democracies fun, and I do like that there's this option, because as a democracy, not being able to justify war goals in other democracies is kind of cringe, right? I mean, you then have to abuse the game a tiny bit, like for example, as Great Britain, you can very easily take out the United States right at the beginning, but you have to use the war goal that you gain against Mexico, which costs a lot of stability and war support, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on. So it's this one's actually going to be quite easy. And look who turned up. Look who turned up as well. This is definitely the monarchy. The monarchy versus republic club. Okay, this is definitely what's going on right now. So yeah, we're just gonna let the allies deal with France. Might send some divisions later on, and because we conquered a good swath of Germany, we didn't just liberate them or anything. We sort of did the historical. Not quite, because the Americans weren't involved, obviously, but we did sort of a very thematic splitting up of the former German and Axis territories, and yeah, so now we can invade. The Americans with basically 200 divisions. I mean, that has to be so daunting, and the Americans are nowhere near to being prepared for something like this when it's 1940. I mean, the Japanese haven't even thought about attacking them yet. So it's yeah, this is going to be quite the task, I do think. But you have to consider that they're also being attacked by the British and the entirety of the Commonwealth, by the Brazilians, and by basically everyone. So we'll let the British Royal Navy deal with their ships, and we'll handle the naval invasion. Thank you very much. And there we go, the absolute state of United States. Now, isn't that just beautiful? Isn't that just beautiful? Obviously, we took the areas with the most industry, the most resources, even though we don't necessarily need them. And we gave, the Canadians, we gained essentially a northern slice and everything like that. Absolutely wonderful. Now, we could go after the Japanese, but I think actually the Italians might want another go, because while they are a democracy, they do still have their basic focus tree, and the Axis as a faction technically survives because the Bulgarians never actually joined the war, so they inherited the faction. And we might want to actually do something with them or against them later on, so we'll see if they try anything. If not, we might go against the Japanese eventually, but we'll just see what happens. And just as I finished saying that, the Italians want another go, so let's go. But my army is a little bit far away at the moment. We're gonna have to, well, not far away, but I was currently moving them to the Japanese because I thought the Italians weren't really gonna do this. So yeah, we're gonna have to bring all of them back again. We're gonna bring them all back to the Italian front, and we're gonna, we tried to give them liberty and everything. I mean, you know, we restored the former Austro-Hungarian borders when it comes to their it comes to the stuff they owned. They owned in Italy during the, well, mid-19th century. It's definitely like the Victoria II starting borders for Austria-Hungary when it comes to their Italian holding. So it's, well, it looks like they're going to be expanding a bit because the Italians declared war on Greece. And, yeah, so we're going to have to teach him another lesson. And that's that. Peace in our time has been established by the Russians. Italy has been split between Hungary and Greece. France is no more. The United States is no more. And everything, or almost everything, obviously, the Bulgarians are still on the Axis. Almost everything is almost everything is controlled by the Entente, which is headed by the Russians, and look at that industrial power. Absolutely beautiful. And that's only because, well, once we shattered, all the AIs did their own focus trees and we got back almost 100 factories, which is actually quite nice when you consider just the investment of 30 factories. Without that, you know, this would have been possible maybe in like 1941, 1942. Definitely sped things up a bit, but yeah, Kings. Thanks for watching, and check out the mod, and see you next time.